So I was doing one of my late night 5Ks yesterday, and whilst going out on a brisk, chilly Vancouver night, I ended up listening to the Sid Seixeiro show, and the Monday, February 23rd edition of the program, which will be linked in the description below. The aftermath of Canada losing in hockey. What I wanted to talk about in this video was a particular talking point that Sid had on his program from that episode that spoke about winners and quitters. He didn't specifically say those words, but I'm kind of encapsulating the entire idea with just that title alone, because obviously this episode of the show was talking about the aftermath between Canada and the USA following the men's ice hockey gold medal victory by the USA on Sunday morning. And I thought Sid made a very interesting point that I wanted to dive into here, and it revolves around both American players and Canadian players, and what some of them had to say about the way the media portrays these players. Now, I wanted to refer to two quotes here. First, let's talk about what Mark Stone said earlier last week about his teammate on Team Canada and his teammate in Vegas, Mitch Marner. Stone was asked about Marner's reputation for not coming up big. As a teammate, I haven't experienced that. Four Nations gets a huge overtime goal for us, makes an incredible play for the winner. Then tonight, when we need him most, he makes the play. So, I think it's a Toronto thing. Now keep in mind, Mark Stone and Mitch Marner, two Canadian dudes who now play in the States representing Team Canada, and Mark Stone is going out there and very deservedly giving Marner his apples for what Marner was able to do throughout both the Four Nations last year and the Olympic Games this year. Now for our second quote, let's go over to Team USA and their post-gold medal victory press conference, which featured both Hughes brothers and Auston Matthews. The media ended up asking Auston, not directly, but they alluded to the idea of Auston Matthews not necessarily having won too much in his NHL career, and how winning will help him move forward. Matthews said, "I'm just trying to live in the moment, man." Jack Hughes then interjected saying this, "It doesn't matter what anyone says now. Auston Matthews is a winner." Quinn Hughes then said, "That's what the media in Toronto should be talking about. Auston led us to a championship." Matthews then smiled and said, "I don't have anything else to say." Now, if you had spent a microsecond on hockey social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, whatever, you've definitely seen the interview already. These guys are all drunk out of their minds. Quinn Hughes is asking the PR guy on the side for a beer whilst the question is being asked and answered, so you can definitely tell the state of mind that these players were in when those questions were asked. But this is where we go back over to Sid Seixeiro's show, because on Sid's program, he went out there and said about these quotes from Stone and Quinn Hughes, that when an NHL player blames or criticizes the media, quote-unquote, it really is just code for them criticizing the fans. Because you take a look at the four guys that were brought up in this conversation, Mitch Marner, Mark Stone, Auston Matthews, and Quinn Hughes. What do three of those four guys have in common? It's the fact that they were top-tier players in Canadian markets that just didn't want to be there anymore. That didn't want to stick around with said Canadian markets, and, for lack of a better phrase, could not handle the heat of a Canadian market, quote-unquote. Mitch Marner? He wanted to leave Toronto. It was very clear. Four Nations last year, he was talking about going over to Vegas. Oh, what's it like in Vegas? How is it over there? Looking at the neighborhood, looking at houses. He had 1 foot half out the door by the time the second period against Florida in Game 7 ended. You have Mark Stone, who was the face of the franchise in Ottawa, who also found his way out, and who is now throwing shots at the Toronto media for saying all they say about Mitch Marner. You have Quinn Hughes, who was in Vancouver, and whom I think it's so very, very clear nowadays that absolutely no part of him was ever interested in staying with the Vancouver Canucks long-term for a second. You could even debate that as far back as when the guy was drafted, maybe. He wasn't even committed to the idea of being a Canuck long-term or for a significant chunk of his career. Talented player, absolutely. Best defenseman at the Olympic Games, you could very well say that. But Quinn Hughes, especially with what he had been up to after the tournament concluded, I think it's very, very easy to understand why Vancouver Canucks fans are turning their backs on this guy and the memories that he left this city. He couldn't handle the Pettersson-Miller situation. He always talked about blocking out the noise. And now here he is going over into the microphones and saying that, yeah, Toronto, y'all should be talking about how Matthews led us to the gold. That's what you should be talking about. Now I get it. They're defending their guys. Mark Stone, Quinn Hughes, they're sticking up for the players that they have connections with, and that's fair. But I was really intrigued by Sid's commentary on his show that when a player blames the media, they are essentially blaming the fans, without directly saying the word fans. Because you think about it. In Vegas, Mitch Marner is like, I'm sorry to say he's a multimillionaire, but in Vegas he's kind of a nobody. Same thing could be said about Mark Stone. Maybe to a lesser extent you can say Quinn Hughes is that in Minnesota. But what do these American markets have in common? Well, hockey is one of many in all these American markets. Vegas? Okay, well, they've got so much going on in Vegas outside just the Golden Knights. You have the Raiders, you have the Athletics coming up, you have a WNBA team, you have a minor league baseball team, and you've got the Strip, you've got the slots, you've got the Sphere. You have so much to do in Vegas. You are one small piece of the entertainment bubble in that area. Minnesota has sports teams all around, and I get that hockey is a Minnesota thing, but you cannot tell me that Quinn Hughes is more of a celebrity in Minnesota than he was in Vancouver. Vancouver has nothing outside of the Lions, the Whitecaps, the Overwatch team, and the Canucks. And what Sid's point on his show was that part of the way that these players, the crazed out fans that are so obsessed with these players that eat everything up and dissect everything and analyze everything and critique everything, part of the way they combat that is to point fingers at the media. Oh, it's the media that's really harsh. It's the Toronto media. They're blaming Mitch Marner. Oh, but he's actually not that bad. They're blaming Auston Matthews. He's not a winner. Well, guess what? He's a winner now. Toronto should be saying that. And Sid's final point on his show was essentially for Canadian market fans. You shouldn't, or we shouldn't be ashamed to have standards for our hockey teams, to care as much as we do about these teams, because let's face it, the amount of sports selection in these Canadian cities compared to the general American city is quite lacking. And quite frankly, hockey has always been Canada's game. Say what you want about Team USA winning the gold in both the men's and women's ice hockey tournaments this year. Hockey is still a Canadian national sport. Canadian fans are passionate about their teams, and for years we have seen that level of pressure be attached to the media and the expectations of how the players in Canadian markets are treated, and some of them just can't handle the heat. Not even the guys that we had spoken about in this video. You could also talk about Matthew Tkachuk. He didn't want to be in Canada anymore. He didn't want to be in Calgary. These American dudes, some of them stay, some of them go. Auston Matthews, of course, decided to stay, and by all accounts it seems like he is committed to Toronto. Brady Tkachuk, you can say the same thing about him in Ottawa. Jake Sanderson as well. You can make some other comments about some other things they have done as of late, but we'll gloss over that in this video for now. But when it comes to some of the winners and the quitters, I think it's very obvious that at this point, some of these American athletes that did decide to ditch Canada, they did so on their own accord, and it's fine for them to do that. But it seems like their real feelings may have just spilled over into the microphones over the past few weeks with these comments. So I don't know. Is this something worth talking about? Is there any substance behind this commentary? Or am I just out to lunch? You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Winners and quitters, Americans and Canadians, I hope you enjoyed this video. And Bye.